What happens when desperation leads to reckless creativity in the heat of war? Picture this, a massive army relying on makeshift solutions, their very survival teetering on the edge of improvisation. In Russia, thousands of tanks are left vulnerable and exposed, their crews frantically trying to shield them with shoddy armor crafted from scrap materials. But guess what? Instead of protection, these desperate measures are backfiring, turning the tanks against their own operators in catastrophic fashion. It all began with a startling revelation: Ukraine's drones, relentless and efficient, have been dismantling Russian tanks by the thousands. In response, Russian soldiers turned to improvised defenses known as coping cages. The aim? To shield tanks from drone attacks by forcing incoming projectiles to detonate prematurely. However, as history has shown, amateur solutions rarely match the efficacy of professional engineering. With these makeshift cages, crew members are simply opening themselves to new risks. Wiso Donald, an expert on military tactics, laid out the pitfalls of these coping cages in a revealing article. Tank vulnerabilities, particularly around turret areas, can be exploited by advanced weaponry. Ukraine's kamikaze drones prove to be more effective and exceptionally cheaper than conventional anti-tank missiles, leaving Russian forces scrambling for answers. Imagine the stress of commanding a vehicle that becomes a target due to improvised armor that barely holds up against sophisticated weaponry. These cages, reminiscent of primitive structures, might provide some level of defense but ultimately do little to thwart the relentless assault of drone warfare. Instead of fending off threats, Russian tanks increasingly become collateral damage. An eye-opening account described how the very defenses meant to protect these armored behemoths are leading to their destruction. As crews affix these cages, they inadvertently damage vital machinery, crippling their tanks from within, while giving Ukrainian forces an even easier prize. Consider this: a transmission, the heart of movement for any vehicle, can quickly turn into a liability when additional weight and pressure are applied. A Russian tank crew revealed that mounting a coping cage can result in catastrophic failure of the transmission. This means that in their effort to protect themselves, they are rendering their tanks immobile, leaving them utterly exposed to drone strikes. To witness this paradox, soldiers destroying their own vehicles in the name of safety, is a haunting commentary on the dire straits of modern warfare. As the situation worsens, the need for effective armor and professional-grade solutions becomes glaringly evident. Without the explosive reactive armor, designed specifically to counter threats such as drone-dropped grenades, Russian forces are left with no choice but to rely on these impractical measures. The irony is raw: the lack of proper equipment leads teams to create homegrown alternatives that only exacerbate their vulnerabilities against the relentless Ukrainian drone onslaught. Can these armored behemoths survive such glaring deficiencies? Or are they doomed to fall victim not just to enemy attacks, but to the very defenses meant to protect them? The answer to this chilling question may lie in the hands of soldiers grappling for survival in the chaos of conflict, an endless cycle of desperation fueling invention that only leads them deeper into the abyss. In a desperate bid to shield their tanks from aerial threats, Russian troops have developed makeshift defenses, known colloquially as zamangles. These improvised solutions include everything from wire mesh cages to wooden logs strapped awkwardly to armored vehicles. While these defenses sometimes provide temporary respite against Ukrainian drones, they seldom hold up under persistent attack. The irony, however, is staggering: these very constructs, born out of necessity, are proving detrimental to the tanks themselves. In a chilling report shared on November 9, tank historian Andrei Tarasenko interviewed a Russian tank operator who laid bare the grim realities of this improvised armor. When crews affix these makeshift cages directly to their tanks, unexpected peril arises. The outer layer may endure, but its transmission, the critical system that channels power from the engine to the tracks, often fails catastrophically. One soldier recounted a harrowing experience. They crafted a zamangle from cables, which barely traveled 10 kilometers before its gearbox succumbed to the strain. The weight and load exerted by these futile protective measures are enough to decimate tank components, leading to swift breakdowns and complete immobilization. Can you imagine the frantic scene of soldiers, weaponry at the ready, only to find their tank crippled and useless due to an ill-fated attempt at protection? The sheer desperation drives them to mount these contraptions on their turrets, but the consequences are severe. The operators themselves have learned that the more they try to shield their vehicles from drone attacks, the more they risk rendering them inoperable. With their ability to maneuver compromised, soldiers face a chilling choice: abandon the tank and expose themselves, or remain trapped in a hulking, vulnerable shell. The spectacle is shocking yet reveals a powerful truth. In the absence of effective military support, namely adequate reactive armor, Russian soldiers are left to improvise solutions in the heat of battle. Without proper equipment, these haphazard measures lead to a tragic cycle where attempts at defense bring about crippling damage. The real question unfolds before us: how long can these soldiers endure in the face of such overwhelming odds, armed only with ingenuity and resourceful desperation? In a desperate bid to shield their tanks from Ukrainian drones, Russian soldiers are inadvertently destroying their own vehicles. A tank's transmission, essential for moving, is under constant strain. When compromised, the tank becomes immobile, a dire fate in the face of aerial threats. Strikingly, these improvised protections, called Zamangles, do little more than offer false security. When a tank's transmission fails, it becomes a sitting target, rendering its crew vulnerable to drone strikes. Abandoning a tank becomes inevitable, leading to its demise even without enemy fire. Why would they risk this? The answer lies in the poor quality of the equipment provided to Russian forces. Many of these tanks lack the sophisticated explosive reactive armor needed to protect against missiles and drones. A soldier admitted, "The reactive armor is a complete mess," revealing shortages and subpar sighting of vital protective elements. They resort to reinforcing tanks with makeshift solutions, utilizing whatever scraps they can muster, hoping for effectiveness. Strapped wires and homemade panels may provide minimal defense, yet failing systems only amplify their plight. The irony is chilling: with every layer added to the turret, the risk of malfunctioning equipment rises. Forced to improvise without adequate resources, Russian tank operators find themselves in a cruel paradox: trying to protect their tanks leads to their destruction. As they rush to shield their vehicles, they create a ticking time bomb. Gearboxes under pressure from these makeshift solutions burn out quickly, leaving tanks prone to disaster. What happens next when they realize they're not just defending their tanks, but obliterating their very capability to fight back? The tension mounts. Their resolve for survival could ironically seal their fate, as they teeter on the brink of chaos amid relentless drone assaults. In the depths of war, where innovation meets desperation, a staggering revelation unfolds. Russian tank operators are forced to craft their own reactive armor. Once effective machinery, now twisted metal bound by improvisation. With a lack of resources, they resort to makeshift solutions, creating armor that functions only half the time at the optimal angle. But what drives them push forward despite such odds? In ongoing battles, Russian forces can be seen stitching together their own defenses in battlefield workshops, think garages filled with ingenuity and resourcefulness. Using explosive materials from UR-77 mine-clearing charges, they pack salvaged containers and strap them on their tanks. This homemade armor mirrors an innovative spirit, yet it embodies the anxiety of a dire situation. When the stakes are as high as they are, is a 50-50th solution better than no protection at all? But herein lies a critical flaw: the inconsistent materials result in armor blocks that sometimes fail to detonate on impact. As Russian tankers struggle to evade Ukraine's drones, they discover that their solutions may inadvertently sabotage their operations. Desperation can drive humans to incredible lengths, yet can also lead to catastrophic blunders. And it's not just makeshift approaches that plague them. Many of Russia's tanks lack the robust protective systems that should be standard. There are tales echoing through the ranks of vehicles once equipped with sufficient explosive reactive armor, now reduced to relics of the past, reminiscent of distant battles. As stories echo among the crews, the truth hangs heavy: the disparity between what they have and what they need has never been more apparent. Imagine being in a tank, surrounded by a heavy atmosphere of sweat and engine heat, only to face down your own failing defenses. This reality takes a toll. When layered protective strategies falter, the metal shields that are meant to protect become a liability. In an ironic twist of fate, Russian tank crews wrestle between crafting armor and ensuring their vehicles can still move. The very shields designed to protect them end up crippling their mobility. The question lingers: how does one prioritize protection against the looming threat of aerial assaults? As improvisation shapes the battlefield, the future of Russian mechanized warfare hangs on the edge of a knife. The tales of rapid-fire decisions and choices made under pressure contribute drastically to the shifting tides of conflict. The embers of ingenuity burn brightly, but will they forge a path to victory, or lead to further ruin? Each armor modification carries the weight of uncertainty, a reflection of the crumbling foundation beneath the surface of Russia's military might. If a tank's armor becomes its grave, what hope remains for those within? The echoes of the mechanical struggle resonate in an unforgiving theater of war, painting a vivid picture of resourcefulness blurred by desperation. The armor redirects the force outward, shielding the vehicle from harm, yet Russia's homemade versions fall short, turning a lifesaver into a liability. Can you fathom the madness of armor that backfires and dooms the very steel beasts it's meant to defend? In the gritty fog of war, the sharp clang of wells echoes as soldiers scramble to patch their machines, the acrid stench of explosives lingering in the air like a deadly perfume. Torn metal grinds underfoot, a rough reminder of failures that cost lives. This is no mere tale of desperation, it's a shocking betrayal where professional defenses crumble before Ukraine's relentless drones. Picture a soldier's flashback, hands slick with sweat, gripping hot metal sheets in a makeshift shop, the rumble of distant artillery vibrating through his bones as he forges blocks from scavenged mine charges, hoping against hope that this jerry-rigged shield will hold against death from above. Why settle for half measures when Russia should arm every tank with factory-grade reactive armor? But the reality is cruel, they can't, forcing crews into desperate inventions. Their own creations, pulled together in frantic field garages, succeed maybe half the time against angled strikes. Still, it's all they have amid Ukraine's drone onslaught. Shockingly, even the professional reactive armor Russia deploys has faltered since the conflict ignited. August 2022 reports revealed a flurry of main battle tanks lost, their ancient plates, some relics from the 1994 Chechen War, proving inadequate. Where might these armored giants hold when reliability means survival? Nearly 3-decade-old defenses surely weren't the vision Russian tankers dreamed of, strapped to their hulking forms. Deeper troubles plague them, rooted in untrained hands that fumble installations. The UK's Ministry of Defence flagged this in an August 2022 alert. Crews likely lack expertise in maintaining explosive reactor armor, resulting in sloppy fits or blocks left entirely absent. Skipping the armor is one trap, watching it compounds the horror. Those misguided attempts wreck their own vehicles, as layered defenses demand precision. The initial blast layer fails if gaps gape between blocks, weakening the second layer's pushback. Imagine absorbing amplified explosions, the tank shuddering under unleashed fury. Is this not a cruel irony, a self-inflicted wound? Eyewitness footage from Ukraine captures grotesque turret ejections, vivid proof of these flaws. It's a vicious loop, attempt protection, yet invite greater ruin through ignorance. Are soldiers pawns in a game rigged against them, where ironclad tech becomes their undoing? The metallic taste of defeat hangs heavy, vibrations from failed blasts tingling on skin as hopes shatter in thunderous roars. In a world where survival hinges on quick thinking and creativity, Russian tank operators find themselves in a desperate battle, not just against their enemies, but against their own machinery. Picture the scene: heavy tanks, once the pride of the battlefield, now draped in hasty adaptations that might promise protection but instead sow chaos and destruction. Such is the stark reality of Russian tanks equipped with makeshift protective elements, referred to as zamangles. These improvised armor solutions, crafted from whatever scrap materials can be found, aim to fend off the relentless drone attacks devastating Russian forces. The concept seems simple: create layers that can absorb and deflect explosive impacts. Yet, the execution reveals a troubling flaw: when these layers are improperly aligned, they fail to do their job, leaving these mighty machines vulnerable to catastrophic damage. Instead of shielding, they become a catalyst for their own destruction, leading to instances of turret ejection documented in chilling footage from the front lines. But why accept these shoddy defenses? Is it a choice of lesser evils? As absurd as it may seem, Russian tankers face a grim decision. Should they rely on flawed reactive armor that can turn their tanks into mere wrecks, or opt for the innovative zamangle, which while inadequate, might at least offer a glimmer of hope for escape? The stakes are high. A disabled tank may still provide life-saving cover if situated carefully, as there's a chance to retreat before the inevitable drone swarm descends. This desperate hope is echoed in reports from Euromedin press, suggesting that if a tank with ZOM angles can inch forward, blow a few rounds at Ukrainian positions, it fulfills its purpose in the eyes of high command. Putin's strategy seems clear: allocate resources without regard for loss, so long as they can inflict damage. Yet, this often results in tanks rendered immobile not by enemy fire, but by the very armor designed to protect them. Every twist in this tale raises critical questions about resource adequacy and tactical foresight. Is the Russian military inadvertently dooming its own troops by relying on ineffectual solutions? As the war continues, this contradiction deepens. Outdated strategies plague present realities. Instead of adapting, these tanks cling to shreds of hope, inactive, yet still sent forth into the chaos of battle. Will these compromised defenses hold the line, or will they crumble under the weight of enemy assault, leading to more dire consequences? The uncertainty looms large, reflecting a broader failure to innovate on the battlefield. But before their own troops were betrayed by factory armor, now, the stakes rise in a battlefield catastrophe. Can you fathom the horror of tanks that were meant to dominate, now crumbling like forgotten relics under the ruthless skies of conflict? Picture the metallic groans of failing machines, the acrid sting of explosives in the air, the desperate scrambles of crews amid mechanical betrayal. What if I told you Russia's armored beasts, once symbols of unstoppable might, are turning the tide against their own masters in ways no one saw coming, a twist that exposes the emperor's crumbling throne? So, we've seen how those makeshift cages, born from frantic improvisation, are ironically sabotaging the tanks they're meant to shield. Cables and wires strangling the very gears that power movement, gearboxes shattering under phantom loads. And as we peel back the layers, a deeper debacle emerges. Russia's tanks, the core of what was dubbed a special military operation, were never built for the dragon's breath of this war. Putin bankrolled dreams of swift conquest, but reality clawed back with savage irony. In September 2022, the Kyiv Independent painted a grim picture. Russia rolled in with 3,330 operational tanks, roaring into Ukraine like thunder on tracks. But by that same month, at least 994 lay obliterated, 30% of their fleet scattered in smoking ruins, devoured by foes they underestimated. Imagine the rumble of fallen metal, the jagged shards biting into the earth, the echo of explosions that silenced entire crews. Where was the evolution? The armor upgraded for modern fury? Instead, reserves dragged aging beasts from storage, clattering hulks more scrap than soldiers, their hulls etched with decades of neglect. Then came the drones, buzzing harbingers that flipped the script, turning tanks from predators into prey. Yet, in those early barrages, Russia's war machines brawled at the front, spearheading colossal mechanized sieges against fortified lines. Armor was their shield, absorbing the sting of aerial assaults. Or so the plan went. But feel the gut-churning failure, pieces of that so-called protection flaking off mid-battle, explosions ripping through faulty joints, the sensory assault of burning oil and panicked shouts. A humiliating reversal for a force that fancied itself invincible. Russia, cornered and humiliated, resorted to cruel calculus, tossing tanks like cannon fodder to drain Ukraine's arsenals, a grim gambit far removed from their heroic design. The hardware bleeds out to empty drone swarms. But here's the acidic revelation: this butcher's bill can't endure. Resources aren't infinite, morale fractures like brittle glass. As Or Express underscores, the well runs dry. Desperation grips the Kremlin, whispers of dragging obsolete T-64s from mothballed tombs, breathing life into rusted ghosts. Will these spectral survivors avert total meltdown, or drag the war into even darker abysses? The clock ticks, and failure looms larger than the smoke-filled horizons. What's next when even allies become enemies, and innovation yields only self-destruction? Imagine this shocking twist. In the heat of battle, a nation's mighty tanks are tearing themselves apart from the inside out. Russian forces, desperate against relentless Ukrainian drones, cobble together makeshift armor. But these jerry-rigged defenses aren't just flawed, they're sabotaging the very machines they're meant to save. Picture the rumble of engines fading, the clash of metal twisting, the acrid stench of overheated gears. How far will a superpower fall when its own ingenuity backfires spectacularly? Feel the desperation in the air? Remember how Russia's homemade defenses, like those chaotic welded cages, strain and crack tank frames while battling aerial threats. This reckless improvisation isn't just failing, it's crippling transmissions, leaving armored beasts stranded. The groan of failing gearboxes echoes across frozen fields, as crews scramble in panic. What if the cure is deadlier than the disease? Turrets grind to a halt under cumbersome loads. Fear grips operators, will their next move doom the vehicle? Can they ignore the drip of leaking fluids, the metallic tang in the air? Dive deeper into the folly. Reflect on those shattered transmissions rendering tanks immobile, prey to drones. Anger brews as soldiers, exhausted and under-equipped, resort to garage-born reactive blocks. The dank scent of makeshift explosives lingers in dim workshops. These half-hearted patches work half the time, at best. Shudder at the judgment, is Russia's lack of proper armor handcuffing its own men? Emotions boil, frustration from neglected tech, dread of battlefield failures. You won't believe the hubris, is stealing ideas from enemies the ultimate humiliation? Turn the page of absurdity. Picture old relics of reactive armor, crusty and unreliable, detonating poorly or not at all. The sharp bang of misplaced blasts rattles crews, the bitter smoke choking nostrils. Russia's storerooms emptify, forcing field fixes that invite disaster. Anger flares, why are decades-old defenses failing so miserably? Twists abound in this catch-22, proper installation means survival, but errors mean catastrophic ejections. Feel the despair as turret pieces fly, videos capturing the carnage. Is this incompetence unraveling an empire? Now, confront the raw reality. With tanks stalled by their shields, Ukraine claims easy victories. The grind of immobilized tracks vibrates uselessly. Panic rises, crews abandon prized vehicles, exposed to buzzing drones. Innocence shatters, shells pierce undefended hulls. Is sacrificing machines for protection the ultimate irony? Anguish mounts as soldiers question their leadership. What horrors await if this cycle spins out? Desperation breeds wild bets, like reviving ancient T-64s from dust-covered vaults. Push through the haze of exhaustion. Russia's hierarchy juggles short-term infantry pushes to shield mechanized units. Boots pound mud, rifles crackle in shows of force. Will this stave off drone doom? Skepticism cuts deep, can foot soldiers buy time forever? Frustration boils, crews itch for tech that works. The earthy smell of trampled earth mixes with gunfire. Shocking revelations surface, innovations falter, leaving forces vulnerable. Are they clawing at shadows? Enter the evolution of madness. Reactive armor flops, whether aged or botched. Instead, those insane cage contraptions kill transmissions. Out comes foldable screens, patented thefts from Ukrainian ideas. Metal clangs as frames erect, mesh weaves against invaders. The outlet claims 1.2 to 1.5 times efficacy. But is the weight a hidden curse, straining drives anew? Emotions swirl rage at copying foes, shame at heavy burdens. Feel the metallic cold on tacky gloves. Twist of fate, modular designs adapt, yet transmissions whine louder. Cliff edge looms, back to square one? Keep watching. As patents echo Ukrainian defenses, will Russia's cages outlast the strain on engines? The tensile hum of carbon copies tempts hope, but dread whispers sabotage. You wonder, humiliated and frozen, is mimicry the last gasp before collapse? Pulled back for a new act of desperation. In the midst of an ongoing war, Russia faces an alarming decline in its tank fleet. With mounting losses attributed to anti-tank weapons and guerrilla drone assaults, the country is scrambling to find answers. The National Interest published a striking piece on October 9, posing the troubling question, what has become of Russia's formidable arsenal of tanks? Despite having once boasted a fleet of 64,000 Soviet-era tanks, by 2020, that number plummeted to approximately 12,000, a third of which were operational. Today, recent intelligence highlights a grim reality where only about 2,887 tanks remain in storage, with the majority in disrepair. Alarmingly, less than a quarter of these tanks are battlefield-ready, fewer than 100 modern T-80 models, with the rest being outdated T-62, T-64, and early T-72 models. As Russian forces improvise with makeshift armor known as zamangals, they are unwittingly sealing their own fate. These homemade solutions, aimed at countering drone threats, are inflicting severe damage on tank transmissions. Crews are compelled to mount these improvised defenses, not realizing they are hastening the demise of their own vehicles. The chaos on the front lines begs the question, how could a nation rich in military history find itself so drastically short on reliable armor? This predicament starkly illustrates Russia's grim reality. Despite having captured around 20% of Ukrainian territory since February 2022, the tank fleet is straining under the weight of its own improvised solutions. The zamangals may provide a brief reprieve, but they are ineffective against the well-equipped Ukrainian drones that continue to neutralize Russian assets. Therefore, as Russia's crews cling to their increasingly ineffective stratagems, a looming question arises: how much longer can they rely on outdated technology against an evolving adversary? In this frantic bid for armor and support, the urgency of the situation weighs heavily on the minds of Russian tank crews. Each moment spent on the battlefield heightens the stakes, drawing them closer to a fate where their lifeline, the very tanks they trust, might turn against them. The thoughtful, intricate play of warfare continues, yet the outcome appears ever more uncertain. Will Russia be able to find a solution in time, or is it destined to succumb to the very threats it fears? The clock is ticking. Picture this, a battlefield nightmare, where ingenuity turns deadly, and desperate fixes shatter the very machines they're meant to save. In the last chapter, we saw how improvised armor, like those fateful zamangals, cripples Russia's tanks, halting their advance and dooming crews to vulnerability. Yet, even as they push forward a few tortured miles, Russia's grip on Ukraine remains fragile, conquering just 20% since February 2022. Now, the remaining 80% stands defiant, immune to armor that's betraying the tanks meant to conquer it. What if the ultimate defense, hailed as invincible, is crumbling faster than Russia's dreams of victory? Imagine a vast, muddy expanse where the roar of engines clashes with the buzz of drones overhead. Feel the gritty earth clinging to boots, the acrid stench of gunpowder mingling with diesel exhaust. Russia's desperate gambles haven't fixed their armor woes, now they're racing with promises of fixes that will arrive too late, far too late to turn the tide. Even their so-called cutting-edge marvel, designed to dwarf all past failures and reactive shields that fizzled out spectacularly in Ukraine's inferno, seems poised for the same ignoble end. It's called Arena M, a system engineered to vaporize drones by the hundreds with laser precision. But here comes the twist that will jolt you. Arena M, this supposed fortress against the skies, is already shattering under Ukraine's relentless ingenuity. Pulses of destructive energy flash in the night, sparks flying as countermeasures fail, the heavy bang of explosions rattling through hulls that were meant to be untouchable. Why is Russia humiliated once more? Because Ukraine's tactics have evolved, piercing through the hype, rendering this high-tech wonder as useless as those cage contraptions slowly killing Russia's fleet. The system's circuits overload with each failed intercept, wires sizzling like betrayed hopes, leaving tanks exposed to dive bomb drones that hug the ground and strike without mercy. And in this chaos, rhetorical questions echo: can Russia afford to build new tanks fast enough to outpace these self-inflicted disasters? Feelings of dread mount as crews sense the weight of failure pressing down, the tactile horror of jammed gears grinding against fate. The humiliation burns bright. Once masters of mechanized might, Russia's forces now stumble blind, their gear mocked by the very adversaries they underestimated. But wait, what if Arena M's downfall hides an even darker secret, one that Ukraine is exploiting ruthlessly? Whispers on the wind carry the shocking fact: Ukraine has discovered a simple, overlooked flaw in Arena M's design, a blind spot allowing drones to sneak past its dense radar webs. The pungent smoke of failed engines fills the air as tanks become tombs, turrets twisting in agonizing slow motion, crews scrambling with sweat-drenched grips on controls that betray them. Why does this elite defense falter so spectacularly? Because Russia's vaulted innovation crumbles under the pressure, its layers compromised by Russian rot, just like the makeshift armor indulging itself. Feel the seismic jolt as another explosion rocks the earth, burying ambitions in debris and despair. Yet, the saga twists further, a betrayal from within. Unbeknownst to frontline troops, Arena M isn't just failing, it's sabotaging other systems, causing chain reactions that blind nearby vehicles like a runaway fire. The metallic screech of failing hydraulics blends with the whir of dodged but not defeated drones, humiliation piling as Russia faces an army adapting in real time. Is this the end of the tank era for Russia, a farce of phony progress? Emotions surge, rage at incompetence, grief for lives snuffed out by vanity. The sting of defeat sharpens every sensory blow, from the sharp crack of penetrating blasts to the bitter chill of abandonment. In this epic clash, the unimaginable unfolds, Arena M, dismantled not by weapons alone, but by Ukraine's psychological warfare, drones broadcasting taunts that shatter morale before impact. Crews break under the weight, tossing aside the armor that promised salvation but delivers doom. The ground trembles with each thwarted assault, smells of burnt circuits overpowering the battlefield. Why is Russia so outmatched? Because their invincible shield exposes fatal chinks, a twist where progress breeds its own paradox, saving lives momentarily, yet inviting swifter obliteration. And as the dust settles on this grand folly, one question hangs heavy: what monstrous oversight has doomed Arena M to join the scrap heap of Russia's shattered dreams? Feel the despair, the final, crushing revelation that Ukraine's drones aren't just attacking tanks, they're erasing Russia's last illusions of might. This defense, once a beacon of hope, now echoes as a hollow relic. As forsaken as the cruise it failed. The conflict rages on, but for Russia, victory slips like sand through fists clenched in agony.